we haven't really seen autonomous or unmanned ships, naval vessels, as it were, really in any great quantity before the Ukraine war. But through necessity more than anything else, Ukraine has developed this capability that we now see as a sea baby, these autonomous unmanned boats, ships, whatever you want to call them, that have had a tremendous impact on the war so far. I mean, if we just look backwards before looking forwards, drones, mainly kamikaze naval drones, sea drones, have accounted for over 11 Russian ships, some of them big cruisers and missile carrying vessels. And what that has done? It's given Ukraine freedom maneuver in the Black Sea. So at the beginning of the war, people might remember the Black Sea was pretty much shut. Ukraine couldn't export its grain, which is, one of its main sources of income, because Russia dominated the Black Sea. But slowly but surely, mainly through the use of drones, Ukraine managed to pretty much defeat the Black Sea Fleet that used to be based at Sebastopol in the Crimea, but has now been pushed right back to the far side of the Black Sea and is pretty much ineffective. Ukraine, which is not a maritime nation, doesn't have a sort of formal navy as we'd understand it, now has complete freedom of maneuver in the Black Sea and rules the Black Sea. And that is directly through these autonomous drones. So I think that is why it is so significant. And the development that we're seeing at the moment is at a phenomenal rate. The first naval drones we saw were, Sea Baby Mark One or whatever it was, drones that could travel, a couple of hundred kilometers with quite a big payload, but they were full of explosives. They basically hit Russian ships and blew up and destroyed those Russian ships. Now, Ukraine has really made a quantum leap forward. So the latest Sea Baby drones we're seeing, first of all, they have a range of over 1,500 kilometers. I mean, that is hugely significant. And these boats move at great speed, plus a sort of 20 or 30 knots, which in naval terms is very, very quick. What they've also done is really uprated the payload. So the latest Sea Baby drone that the Ukraine Secret Service, who are running these things, the SBU, demonstrate has a payload of 2,000 kilograms. That's 2 tons. That pushing 2 tons over 1,500 kilometers is pretty important. Now, when it comes to the payload itself, that could be 2 tons of high explosive, which is going to blow any ship out of the water. But what we're seeing now is actually, instead of these kamikaze drones, they are reusable. So this week, the demonstration of heavy machine guns put on the drones, rocket launchers, and other type of weaponry, and also the ability to get on target and launch drones into the air to attack. There was a piece early this week where a Russian force was surrounded in the Dnipro River and destroyed. Part of that through the use of drones. So this is very, very capable. I mean, it seems to be the way. I mean, we talk so much about drones in the war in Ukraine, but the maritime drones, I think, are almost more significant than these $500 drones we're seeing all over the place in the land battle, because in effect, one of these sea babies that can carry the sort of weaponry is almost replacing, a frigate or a smaller naval ship that maybe costs millions and millions of dollars and pounds and use a lot of sailors to man and run it. This is now being done autonomously. We've always thought the air war. We've always thought that we would need a lot less fighter jets going forward and bombers, because if you can have an autonomous drone doing the job, then it's probably going to be cheaper and it's probably going to be more effective. But I think one didn't really consider the impact on the sea and also on the land. We are seeing machine guns put onto autonomous platforms that then can go out and do their stuff. But it's clear in the land battle there is still very much the requirement for soldiers on the ground and tanks and that sort of stuff. But in a naval context, Ukraine is demonstrating that's not necessarily the case. And if you can reach and have the reach out of 1,500 kilometers, which is really all Ukraine needs, then it can dominate the sea with these unmanned drones being controlled by people, sat in sheds or whatever it is, using telemetry, using video that's available. But we're also understanding from the Ukrainians that AI is playing a huge part. I mean, we know AI is playing a huge part in all our lives, but the ability to assimilate so much information and detail and be able to then conduct a precision strike, which these sea babies are designed for, you can then sort of see the reality of it. So it is, I would say, this is certainly changing the way that maritime engagement is going to happen. I mean, it's idiosyncratic, I suppose, that yesterday was Trafalgar Day, the greatest naval battle in British history. We wind forward to today, and the Trafalgar Day of tomorrow is probably going to be fought by, autonomous ships and drones, and not great wooden hulks that they were back in 1805 off the coast of Spain. So, yeah, a real change, I think, in maritime warfare is unfolding in front of our eyes. We look at the Russian Navy, which is in a pretty sorry state. And only this week, I think a Russian frigate was being marshaled through the English Channel by British ships, and it's of an age way gone. Many people remember the Russian aircraft carrier that belched oil and thick smoke as it went up and down the Mediterranean. We know that there's a Russian submarine in distress in the Mediterranean at the moment. The Russian Navy is in a pretty sorry state. They might have a few modern ships, but it really personifies actually the war in Ukraine is bleeding the Russian military dry. And when it comes to naval engagement, the SBU Sea Baby drones seem to be absolutely running rings around any of the maritime forces that the Russians still have or can put out to sea. Although, very significantly, we're seeing not very much Russian naval activity in the Black Sea, certainly, close to Crimea and certainly close to Ukraine. So, in an extraordinary operation, the Ukraine Secret Service, Ukraine Navy, whatever we like to call it, has nullified what was once, one of the greatest Russian fleets to ever sail the high seas, the Black Sea Fleet, which to all intents and purposes doesn't exist in any meaningful way anymore.